Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Medical doctors and nutritionalists, alongside a sea of untrained individuals, all offer copious dietary advice, often with clashing viewpoints and varying levels of credibility. A large number advocate for strictly plant based diets, but are there hidden nutritional risks or potential health concerns associated with a vegan diet? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone TV channel xztv.ca. With us this hour to delve into possible health risks of a vegan diet is Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Dr. Fuhrman is a board-certified family physician and seven-time New York Times best-selling author. His latest book is Eat for Life. An internationally recognized expert on nutrition and natural healing, he specializes in preventing and reversing disease through nutritional methods. His website, drfuhrman.com. Dr. Fuhrman, thanks for joining us once again on Mission Evolution.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's just always wonderful to work with you. So, you're a family physician. How much education on nutrition did you get in medical school?
You know, I went to medical school with a specific intent of being a physician specializing in nutrition. So I made it my personal vendetta, to really be an expert in this. But in medical school itself, it's not their interest. You're really learning about drugs, surgery, and a lot about physiology and pathophysiology and the process of disease. But doctors really don't have the skills to motivate, train, and change people's behaviors and get them to eat healthfully. So it's a growing part of medicine today, and the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has brought this mainstream where doctors are being certified in this field now, usually in their postgraduate training. And there's more than 8,000 doctors now who are certified as board certified from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. There's also in the New York City hospitals, there's a lifestyle medicine office in most of the hospitals there, including Harvard and GW, George Washington University. So it's a growing field, I should say. But no, we didn't get it in medical school.
Well, I'm glad it's growing because, the old adage, you are what you eat, I think has a lot more truth than one might think.
Yeah, sure.
So your bio says you're internationally recognized expert on nutrition and natural healing. How did you get there? What was your course like, your trajectory to get there?
Well, I'm president of the Nutritional Research Foundation, which is a nonprofit specializing in doing studies to ascertain how we can use nutritional interventions to treat and reverse disease. But yes, it's kind of been my passion, my love, that to say that, people don't have to have diabetes, they don't have to have heart attacks or strokes, that nutritional science has made such incredible advances that we can stop people, more than 85% of all cancers don't have to occur. And so we really can extend human lifespan. And the average lifespan of humans could be closer to 100 years old, not the 80-year-old lifespan we're seeing for most average Americans. So we have tremendous upside, not from high technology medicine, but from low technology nutritional excellence. So that led me to being critical of the medical profession, which just focuses on drugs while people continue to abuse their bodies with disease-causing substances. So I developed this specialty, and of course, you may know I've had 5 successful PBS television shows. I have 7 New York Times best-selling books. I raised over $70 million for public television. And, so I've gotten a lot of opportunity. I've been very blessed to reach millions of people with a message of eating better and taking care of their health. And because of that, I've produced a lot of studies and gotten lots of people who've changed their life trajectory and reversed heart disease, got rid of their high blood pressure, reversed their diabetes, got rid of their autoimmune disease like lupus and scleroderma, and psoriasis went away. And so what I'm saying here, nutrition is a powerful intervention, therapeutic intervention. And that's really what I've devoted my research and my interest in learning and studying and applying with patients over the last 4 decades.
It's pretty impressive, sir. So you talked about eating right, can create longevity, but can it literally, does it prevent disease or can it literally reverse disease once it's already set in?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that the same diet style that's designed to maximize human longevity, slow aging, and protect against cancer. And that means including foods with the most powerful anti-cancer compounds in them, which I call G-bombs: greens and beans and onions and mushrooms and berries and seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds, that we can pick these foods out, include them in our diet to have incredible anti-cancer effects. And the same diet style and the same dietary portfolio that enables humans to prevent cancer and age slow into the long time can be therapeutically effective to people to reverse disease. They lose weight, their diabetes goes away. They lose the visceral fat, and their blood vessels become more elastic, and their blood pressure goes to normal, and their chest pains go away. And if they have skin diseases, their eczema or psoriasis goes away. If they have headaches, their headaches go away. So the satisfaction and tremendous reward I've gotten over the last 3 decades is working with people and being able to advocate with authority and predictability that, yes, you can get well. If you don't have to take drugs the rest of your life, and you don't have to suffer with type 2 diabetes, you don't have to have high blood pressure forever. If you follow this, if you really want to get in great health, you can do it and you can reverse your disease. And you can even get better from asthma and chronic headaches and even lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. That's how effective this is. And I've obviously been not only involved with my own clinical practice, but also produced research studies to show that this is effective.
What kind of research studies are they?
Well, for example, in my book, Eat for Life, which is one of my most recent books, I've written 12 books, but I have more than 2,000 scientific references in that book. And so written for lay people, but with 2,000 scientific references, you want every paragraph or every statement you're making to be well supported by numerous amounts of research. And the credence of the research is more supported when you have studies that show the same findings, when one study corroborates another study, when a short-term study is corroborated by a long-term study where people have followed it for 30 years and showed a better outcome versus just, for example, if you took a cholesterol-lowering drug and it lowered your LDL cholesterol, well, that's great, and that's effective for lowering cholesterol. But does that translate into a longer lifespan? Or might it be that lowering cholesterol with a drug increases your risk of cancer, and the increased or diabetes and the increased diabetic or cancer deaths offset the benefits for heart disease? So do we have a study going on for 30 years, 40 years, tracking people to the end of life and looking at hard endpoints to corroborate the benefits of the cholesterol and drugs? So I'm saying you get more credence when you have a long-term study corroborating a short-term study, which is a soft endpoint. The long-term study is showing a hard endpoint like age of death or cause of death. So yes, we have an incredible large number of studies corroborating the fact that eating salads with raw onion and cooked mushrooms and beans and lots of green vegetables, we have literally thousands of studies showing that eating a wide variety of colorful plant foods extends human lifespan and prevent cancers. And that is not, it should not be controversial because it's an overwhelming amount of data that almost all research scientists and physicians specializing in nutrition agree with. So we have, as far as the layperson thinking there's so much disagreements and so many people, so much different of view and who do we believe, that's really not that accurate because 98% of people in the field of nutritional research and nutritional science agree with each other on the type of inclusionary foods we need to put in our dietary protocol to prevent cancer and extend human lifespan.
So what do you think is the most important findings in nutritional research science over the last 5 years?
The most important findings, believe it or not, that people are going to be shocked by is that as we rev up more animal protein in our diet, more animal protein as a percent of total calories, we see lifespan go down in a dose-dependent relationship from all-cause mortality, both cardiovascular death and cancer death. More animal products, more animal protein, shorter lifespan. And the converse is true, which surprised people, and that was as people increased the amount of plant-derived protein in their diet, they lived longer and had longer lifespans. So we're leading to the thing, more plant protein, less animal products, less animal protein. And I think that's not only because these foods are rich in plant proteins, it's what they also contain. In other words, the plant proteins are not as biologically complete. So they don't raise IGF-1 excessively high that can promote cancer. But the plant proteins are accompanied with lots of phytochemicals that act as antioxidants and a homeoetic relationship with the cell, meaning that the cells aren't wasting energy and producing as many toxins, and the digestive tract gets fueled with beneficial bacteria that don't produce pro-inflammatory compounds either. Like when you eat more animal products, you produce more TMAO, trimethylamine oxide, which inflames the lining of the blood vessels, increasing the deposition of atherosclerosis, and you get more heart disease. It's not just the cholesterol and saturated fat in the animal product. It's also the animal protein itself, leading for more gram-negative organisms to be growing in your digestive tract. So what I'm saying is that this recent findings are that the increased variety of plant substances in the diet gives us this opportunity to have a longer lifespan. And people with the healthiest, most anti-inflammatory microbiome are people who eat the widest variety of natural plant foods.
So speaking of microbiome, there's a lot of things that have interfered with our microbiome. Antibiotics, say for instance, and they didn't know that at first. So people of my era, ended up having a lot of really strong antibiotic therapy, and it seems to have affected the gut. Then is that the case? And if so, is that playing part in us not being able to absorb the nutrients that are available?
Well, it's true that the overuse of antibiotics being prescribed inappropriately for viral indications or when they're not needed leads to certain problems in people's lives. And the use of antibiotics for a young person could increase the risk of eczema or even cancer. The number of antibiotic times you've taken an antibiotic for a urinary tract infection can significantly increase the risk of getting breast cancer in later life, for example. So yes, the answer is overuse of antibiotics and inappropriate use of antibiotics does have serious potential side effects. And when you live in such a healthy manner, your chance of getting infection is much lower. And so now we try to live healthfully to avoid the need for getting infected. And also just being fit and eating healthy keeps you thinner, increases your immune function to not be sick with bacterial infections. So for example, being significantly overweight doubles your risk of death from pneumonia. And we saw that during COVID, when people who didn't eat healthy and were overweight had much higher risk of serious morbidity and mortality when they got COVID infections. So yes, we want to reduce the exposure to drugs if possible.
So does the is the immune system impacted then by the same things that make us fat?
Yes, that's correct. In other words, our diet, we're a green vegetable dependent animal, particularly the cruciferous greens like broccoli and cabbage that have isothiocyanates, which support the immune function and enable immune surveillance, the ability of the body to seek out and destroy abnormal cells that can become cancerous. So yes, we're trying to, and these same substances that build the immune system's ability to recognize abnormal cells and fight cancer help build the intraepithelial lymphocytes that surround the digestive tract. And these are form the defenders at the gates of the castle of the body. So they could knock out.
We're going to have to talk about the castle on the other side of a station break.
Okay.
Dr. Fuhrman and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Is protein overrated? With us this hour discussing the complex issue of animal protein versus plant protein is Dr. Joel Fuhrman. His website, drfuhrman.com. Before we get on to the protein issue, we were talking about how things that cause obesity also cause some other very wide and varied disorders, including immune deficiency. Would you continue?
That's correct. When you're overweight, the fat cells, of course, spew out pro-inflammatory compounds and make the body, which suppress immune function. and also raise estrogen levels in the body, which can increase risk of prostate and breast cancer. And it's called insulin resistance, which means the fat cells prevent insulin molecule from bringing glucose out of the blood for use utilized by our tissues. So insulin resistance means more glucose, more sugar stays in the blood longer, and the body has to make more insulin. So when you're overweight, you're getting more insulin, more estrogen, and of course, you're having reduced immune function. So the same when people eat fast foods, processed foods, fried foods, overeat calories, they're going to suppress their immune function. They're going to decrease the nutrient density in their tissues. They're going to increase the toxic level in their tissues. And of course, they're going to raise hormones to cancer-promoting levels.
So, protein is cited as a major issue in plant-based diets. What foods are the highest in plant proteins?
That's exactly the point of this, of the people. What should leave here with is that the same foods that are high in plant protein seems to have the most of power to make people live longer. And those foods are 3 foods: green vegetables, beans or legumes, and nuts and seeds. So there's 5 plant foods in all, right? Natural plant foods. There's fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts and seeds, and intact whole grains. Now, the only one low in protein is fruit. So plant foods have an adequate protein unless you were eating too much fruit, like more than half your diet was fruit, your diet could be too low in protein. But if you're putting oil on your food instead of nuts and seeds as a source of fat, then you could be taking protein out of your diet as well and making a diet with predominantly plant food be low in protein. But if you're eating enough green vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans, then we can build up to easily get your protein needs met with, 70 to 90 grams of protein per 1,500 calories. You can build up, in other words, you can design a diet that gives you a robust amount of protein if you eat a healthy, well-designed plant-based diet, not eating junk food, not eating fried foods, junk foods, oils. Because you can eat plant foods and non-animal products, plant foods that are junk food and don't have good protein, sugar, maple syrup, oils. We could eat processed foods, but if you're eating natural whole foods, and what I'm saying is these studies, the greens, the beans, the nuts and seeds have these phytonutrients, bioflavonoids, resistant starches, lignins, all types of sterols, stanols, all types of chemicals that make us live longer, that lower estrogen, that extend human lifespan, and improve immune function. So the same plant foods that are rich in protein also contain a host of beneficial nutrients that benefit our longevity.
I know some years ago, quite a few years ago, there was this big hoopla about a complete protein and that you had to, at a meal, combine grain with, say, beans, or that sort of thing. Is that valid, or do we have to eat it all at once to create a complete protein to replace meat?
We do not have to eat it all at once, but it's good to have variety of plant foods in your diet, so you are getting all the complementary amino acids over the 24-hour period, but you don't have to eat it all at one meal. Plus the fact that, don't forget, the body's able to produce the level of amino acids needed for normal function if you're eating enough calories and they're from healthy calories, because your body can digest some of the bacteria in the gut, and the sloughed off epithelial cells from the digestive tract lining are digested with the meal. And we have stored proteins in the epithelial line, on the interstitial lining of the digestive tract. So the body can adjust things accordingly to make the protein it needs to make the hormones it needs at the levels for good health. But the problem is when we eat animal protein, especially too much animal protein, we can't stop too much amino acids from entering the bloodstream in a complete form. And because those excess calories, protein calories, can't be as efficiently burned for energy or for fat, if they're not burned for energy, they're stored as they turn into hormones that promote growth of muscle and the growth of fat and the growth of tumors. So the excessive growth promoting high biological proteins are what we're careful of, so they don't promote tissues that shouldn't be growing, like tumors when we're an adult.
So what are the advantages of plant-based protein versus animal? We've been talking about a lot of them.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the message of modern nutritional science, because people have been drummed into their head the importance of protein. We need the protein for muscles and bone strength with aging, and also for immune function and brain function with aging. So we need these proteins, but I think the message that they've been drummed into their heads is we get our protein from animal products. And now this new message is, no, we get our proteins the same way the chimpanzees and the hippopotamus and the giraffe and the elephant get their proteins. We get it from green vegetables, and humans eating beans and nuts and seeds with green vegetables doesn't only give us adequate protein, it radically extends human lifespan. Radically. We're talking about ending 10 or 20 years to a human's lives when they're actually switching out, reducing animal protein, and eating more high protein plant foods. Americans don't eat nuts and seeds for fat. They eat animal fats and oils. They're not eating walnuts and almonds and sesame seeds, and right? They're not really eating nuts and seeds, a major source of their calories. But all the studies done on this subject, more than 50 of them, show that as you include nuts and seeds in a daily diet, your risk of cardiovascular death goes down by 40%.
Oh my goodness.
40%. A meta-analysis means that the corroborative findings from all these studies are like, one study doesn't show 10%, another study shows 50%, another study shows 5%. No, they all show about 38 to 40% reduction in cardiovascular death from the inclusion of at least an ounce of nuts and seeds a day. But preferably, we recommend a minimum of an ounce and a half a day, because the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2, Adventist Health Study 2 done in this country, been going on for years and years. They're studying a population of Americans that generally live and eat healthier than most other Americans do. And when they showed people on this healthier cohort that have less than a half an ounce of nuts a day to more than an ounce and a half a day, the difference on total mortality was 30% difference, and in cardiovascular mortality was 40% different. In other words, we get tremendous increase in lifespan from utilizing nuts and seeds as a source of fat and protein, instead of using oils and animal fats.
So what about like olive oil, that sort of thing? Is that not as beneficial as they've been crowing about?
That's correct. It's not as beneficial as they've been crowing. Let me give you an example. Because as you put more oil in the diet, obviously, if you had used walnuts or almonds or olives instead of the oil, you would have gotten the fat in a form that is digested more slowly, and it wouldn't be rushed into the bloodstream with such a lipemic load, so much fat at one time. That drives appetite, as an appetite stimulant, drives fat storage and drives people to overeat. So olive oil is fattening, whereas the olive or the nut or seed or the walnut would not have been fattening. Also, that we need fat in our diets for absorption of the anti-cancer phytochemicals. So some fat is good for us. So like the Previmid study, for example, done in Europe, showed that people who used extra virgin olive oil as a source of fat instead of butter and other fats reduced their cardiovascular death rate by 15%. That's a huge amount of reduction of rate. So we're showing here that olive oil is beneficial compared to other sources of fat. But when they compared the olive oil group to the people who were eating nuts and seeds, like walnuts and almonds, they reduced their cardiovascular death rates by more than 50%. And the longest lived people in the Previmid study, the longest lived cohort, were those people eating nuts and seeds at baseline that were then randomized to stay eating nuts and seeds. That was the group that lived the longest. So even though olive oil is better as a source of fat than other sources of fat, it's still not as good as probably eating walnuts and avocado and sesame seeds. Still good, but not the best.
So sometimes we need to cook with, even if we're doing a stir fry, we need some kind of fat in there. Is olive oil still the best for that?
Well, we do stir fries, like we stir fry in water or tomato juice and pineapple, and we stir fry and we put once we stir fry the food, then we put a Thai curry sauce on it. And the Thai curry sauce could have had hemp seeds and cashews and curcumin and lemongrass and dates in there. So we make all these delicious sauces and dressings a different way of cooking, utilizing nuts and seeds, which have lifespan promoting effects, to get great flavor and great texture. Even if we can make an icing on a chocolate bean brownie, we can make an avocado chocolate ice cream. So when the conventional recipe would call for butter or oil, we can turn it and blend the nuts and seeds into a cream sauce and make something tasting just as good with nuts and seeds.
Gotcha. So the longevity of the seeds and that sort of thing, is that why people advocate like quinoa?
Quinoa is a grain.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a seed, isn't it?
Well, it's a starchy. I consider it in the grain field, intact whole grain field, like steel cut oats or oat groats and quinoa and teff, and I don't know if it's but it's not a traditional seed like sesame seeds and flax seeds and chia seeds and sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds are kind of a fatty protein mix, where quinoa is more of a carbohydrate type. Type. Yeah. So
it presents that way, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in any case, I think it's still good for you, but it doesn't contain it's not in the same category as getting our fats from these whole foods. Because keep in mind that low glycemic carbohydrates go into the bloodstream sugar goes in the bloodstream slowly. High glycemic carbohydrates like white flour and white rice and white bread, and go into the bloodstream, the glucose into the bloodstream rapidly. And the rapid height of glucose in the bloodstream stresses the body out and promotes disease. The same thing with fat. Nuts and seeds go into the bloodstream. The lipemic load after the meal, 1 or 2 calories a minute, the body can preferentially burn those calories for energy. A lipemic load from oil or animal fats, you spike a lot of fat in the blood at one time, which then can stimulate atherosclerosis and stimulate the brain, the apostat and the central nervous system, and also be so many calories in the blood at one time can be like addictive, can promote addictive cravings to want to overeat food. So
then we go back to the fat issue, right?
Then we go back to the body fat issue. So it's really better to use whole foods because it's more satiating and it doesn't trigger the brain to want to overeat calories.
So where do you stand on grains? We've been talking a lot about the seeds and the nuts and the, but do we eat too many grains? And is it not just about what grains we eat, but what kind?
Well, certainly we should eat intact grains that are not refined into flour. I always I always say the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead, because white flour is a sugar equivalent. It enters the body as sugar. And so so we're getting, the problem with grains is we're getting most of our grain from processed grains and white flour products. And those are dangerous foods. An intact grain means you use the whole wheat berry, or you use the whole oat groat, or you use the whole quinoa, or you use the whole teff or amaranth, so I'm for grains as a healthy food. But for people with a lower caloric window, who don't need as many calories, they have to cut back on the grains appropriately to be able to include an adequate amount of all the nuts and seeds and greens and beans in their diet. So beans are a more longevity promoting anti-cancer food compared to grains. They have more bioflavonoids. They have more polyphenols. The beans are even better than grains. So if you can't have enough room in your appetite to eat both, you're better off the beans and eating less grain or skipping the grain. But grains are okay if.
By beans, do you mean legumes?
Yes, legumes, correct.
You're not talking about the green ones, okay? So if we're going to start cutting back on grains in order to drop our overall caloric intake, it's better to just kind of stay away from them, and particularly if you have them, make sure they're whole grains, right?
That's correct. Like I might have for breakfast, I might have a tablespoon of flax seeds and a tablespoon of chia seeds, a cup of blueberries and cherries, and maybe I'll have a third of a cup of oat groats in there. I'm not filling my whole bowl up with groats because I wouldn't have room for the berries and the nuts in there and the plant, you know what I mean? So I want to have enough room and all the other things. Maybe I'll put a tablespoon of wheat germ in there or something too. I want to have enough room to feed everything in.
Well, it's time for us to take another station break. Dr. Fuhrman and I will be right back to continue our discussion. Stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. What do the Adventists have to do with health? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing diet and health is Dr. Joe Fuhrman. His website, drfuhrman.com. Dr. Fuhrman, you briefly mentioned the a study that was done with the Adventists. They're a religious group, I believe. Would you tell us a little bit about that and why it's important findings for our health today?
Well, the Adventist Health Study has been going on for decades in the United States. And it's one of the foundational studies in human nutrition that's the information we glean from those studies have been so important in the history of nutritional science. And the reason for that is that Adventists as a whole are encouraged to live healthfully. They generally don't smoke, they exercise regularly, and they don't drink a lot of alcohol. So they're encouraged to eat healthier in general. So when you're comparing a vegan an Adventist who's eating some animal products or meat or eggs compared to one who's not, you're not confusing you're not getting more confounding variables with smoking, drinking, or eating unhealthfully in the person who's eating meat compared to the one who's eating vegetables. They're both eating pretty healthily on both sides. So we were able to look at people based on sex, age, race, and with other parameters being relatively similar. So we're able to compare vegans to vegetarians to non-vegans to people who eat meat more or less. So we're able to get a lot of data out of the Adventist Health Study 2. And they have a large number of researchers and a large number of participants. There's over like 900,000 person-year follow-up in the Adventist Health Study 2. So what we're talking about now. So in other words, we have a huge amount of data, a huge amount of researchers. It's going on for decades. And every year they publish new data on new subjects from the same cohort they've been studying for decades.
Oh, interesting. So it's a more controlled than just working with the general populace for all the reasons you mentioned.
Yes, it's very controlled, and the data we have is very important. Like I said earlier, Adventists who eat nuts and seeds in the highest quintile have 40% low risk of cardiovascular death compared to Adventists who eat the lowest nuts and seeds. So we're comparing similar diet, similar healthy people, one eating nuts, one not eating nuts. What happens differently? And we see, wow, you eat nuts, you live so much longer, you get so much low risk of heart disease. It's amazing, you know?
So what is the most surprising thing that has come from those studies?
Well, I think surprisingly, we find that three or four things. Number one, the lowest rate of cardiovascular death and cancer deaths was in the vegan vegetarians, the people who were not eating animal products in that study. Then people eating, they tested whether maybe animal products just once or twice a week. What about people who eat meat once a week? Is there a significant increase in cardiovascular death? And the answer is yes, there was. But the flexitarians who ate nuts and seeds had lower risk of death than the vegans who did not eat nuts and seeds. So even though meat was a risk factor, not eating nuts was a bigger risk factor. No, okay. Then they saw, okay, since the vegans have lower risk of cardiovascular deaths, what diseases were increased risk in the vegans as a cause of death? And this is what they found in the recent study. And I have the study right here in front of me. It's published in October 2024. Here's the study if people just want to see the name of the study. But in any case, it's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And what it found was that the vegan vegetarians, the people who were not eating any animal products, had a 17% increased risk of stroke and a 13% increased risk of dementia and a 37% increased risk of Parkinson's disease compared to the people who were eating animal products in the diet. So that's there. Even though they were clear about being low rates of cancer, there were increased risk of neurologic deficits in later life, and we now are understanding the reasons for that, and that's what we're here to discuss. Is that as people move to a plant-based diet and start to exclude all animal products, there's three or four nutrients become important here to make sure they don't have increased neurologic deficit in later life. One is DHA EPA, particularly DHA, which people commonly know as fish oil. It's the long-chain omega-3 fatty acid we get from fish. Apparently, the studies are showing that when people's omega-3 index gets excessively low from not exposure to the omega-3 fatty acids, then the ability of the body to detoxify and remove neurologic toxins goes down. And one study, for example, showed that the malondialdehyde, a toxin, increased by 50% in people's whose omega-3 index was low. So low omega-3 deficiencies, more exposure to toxins and poisons that could damage the brain and cause, let's say, Parkinson's disease. We know that living near a golf course increases risk of Parkinson's disease. We know that dry cleaning your clothing increases risk of Parkinson's disease. Exposure to chemicals on the farm increases risk of Parkinson's disease. And now we know that the chemicals that could induce Parkinson's disease, the toxicity to those chemicals is enhanced if our omega-3 index is too low. So if we're on a vegan diet and we're not eating any seafood with omega-3 or small animals like frogs or snails or salamanders or whatever, then you should be taking a plant-based omega-3 or a fish oil-based omega-3. So you can get a plant-based or algae-derived omega-3, and you could adjust the dose to have most favored omega-3 index to prolong lifespan and prevent neurologic deficit. And that's what the studies show. The meta-analysis of 48 studies showed the most protection occurred against later life diseases of neurologic deficits with both shrinkage of the brain from dementia and for potential Parkinson's when the dose was adjusted on an individual basis to a person's needs based on a blood test. So the omega-3 index and adjusting your level to be the most favored range show the best long-term outcomes. So we're talking here about vitamin B12. Most people know vitamin B12. Vegans need to take vitamin B12. It's present mostly in animal products. But many people on plant-based diets or vegan diets aren't aware of their need to particularly be aware of their omega-3 index and the DHA they're consuming. And the third most important nutrient that you don't get ideal levels of on a plant-based diet that could impact later life health is zinc, because plant foods bind zinc, and taking extra zinc has been shown to reduce risk of dementia and reduce the risk of pneumonia and reduce the risk of cancer in later life. So it's DHA, EPA, zinc, and B12 that could reduce these neurologic issues seen in vegans. And the third thing we're talking about is salt. The last nutrient is salt, because I said that these vegans had a 17% increased risk of stroke. Now, there are two types of strokes. There's hemorrhagic stroke and there's ischemic stroke, right? So the hemorrhagic stroke is when a fragile vessel in the brain breaks open and you bleed into the brain. That's the type of stroke we see in Asian countries where they eat a lot of salt, where they don't eat a lot of hamburgers and bacon and cheese like we do in America. In the United States, we see more ischemic stroke caused by clots or emboli. In Asian countries, we see more hemorrhagic strokes, 10 times the risk of hemorrhagic strokes in Asian countries because their LDL cholesterol is lower, they have less heart attack deaths and less ischemic strokes and more hemorrhagic strokes. Well, that's what we're seeing in the vegans. We're seeing more risk of hemorrhagic stroke because having a higher LDL cholesterol and eating more meat and bacon and cheeseburgers that causes heart disease thickens the interior and the external wall of blood vessels in the brain, and makes a thickened blood vessel with plaque on it is more resistant to the effects of hemorrhaging when you have salt exposure throughout your life. So what I'm saying here is that salt doesn't just raise blood pressure. The salt exposure through life weakens the interior lining of blood vessels over time. It causes more fragility and aging of the blood vessel, making it a higher propensity to break open. So when a person's on a vegan diet and their vessels are normally thin and not thickened with plaque, then not eating salt becomes more important, because otherwise eating a super healthy diet could be at high risk of a stroke if they still salt their food, use considerable salt on their food. So the vegan diet does not protect you against a hemorrhagic stroke. It only protects you against ischemic stroke. And if you're still salting your food a lot on a vegan diet, you could still have a hemorrhagic stroke. And the risk of hemorrhagic stroke could be so high, it could be higher than a person eating meat. And that's what we saw, a 17% increased risk of stroke in vegans compared to meat eaters.
So with all this, in mind, what is the best diet?
Well, that's a controversial question. My viewpoints are that I think a diet that's vegan, that's supplemented intelligently, is the best diet. Supplemented smartly and intelligently is the best diet, or a diet with a little bit of seafood to get omega-3, zinc, and D and B12. But the problem is the inland lakes are you could say too much nitrogen and toxic runoff, leading to algae overgrowth and the BMA toxin in the lakes and coastal waterways dumping of garbage and plastics. So the seafood has become too contaminated with potentially neurologic causing chemicals. And we're seeing increased risk of ALS and Parkinson's disease in people in Chesapeake Bay and living around inland lakes eating seafood or near the ocean fronts where they're dumping garbage. So it's leading to many of us in the field of lifestyle medicine to be advocating people move to vegan diets and then to supplement their diet with zinc, DHA, and B12 to the levels that would be better achieved if you had been eating seafood in your diet. So even though this is a controversial question and people have different viewpoints, my viewpoint is we're seeing tremendous extension of human lifespan with people following plant-based or plant-predominant diets where we reduce animal products to low levels, which then requires the use of certain supplements.
So basically, the sign of our times is also changing what's the best diet, because what was best before the oceans and the lakes became so polluted was probably a different animal, so to speak, than what's best now.
I think that's true. I think if we were living 100 years ago, having it, because then you wouldn't have all the supplemental science there. Then eating a small amount, eating some seafood mixed in with a predominantly plant-based diet would have given you the most comprehensive exposure to all the nutrients humans needed. I think that would be the best quality diet if we took pollution and contamination of the waterways out of that. Then a diet that probably had a small amount of seafood with a lot of plants would be the best. And now that the waterways are contaminated so much, it's probably better to move all the way and avoid, and to just get more of, take this omega-3 fatty acid supplements that you would get from normally get some fish or seafood.
So what about farm-raised fish?
They're most likely even more polluted, because they have to give them antibiotics because they're living in close proximity to each other. They're still raised off the coastal waterways of the continental shelf. They're raised right at the where the land ends. That's where they have the pens. So and there's still tremendous contamination of the continental shelf. And the most dangerous seafood, by the way, with the highest rates of the toxin BMA that cause PDS, Parkinson's dementia syndrome, and ALS, or bivalves, which used to be the healthiest foods. They have the most DHA and zinc. We're talking about oysters, clams, scallops, and mussels. Because they're bottom feeders and they filter the most water through them, they create the most BMA toxin. And then shellfish like lobster and crab, because they're bottom feeders, get the most plastics and toxic compounds in them. That used to be my go-to most favorite thing on a special occasion, would be to eat something like a lobster. But now I know I wouldn't touch the stuff because it's too contaminated.
Too contaminated.
Yeah, you're better off getting a tropical. If you're going to eat seafood, you're better off being in Polynesia, or Hawaii, where you're getting a wild fish that's not a farm-raised fish, not a commercially raised fish out of the wild ocean.
Do you have to be mindful of the, what you ate? Okay, in other words, the larger the animal, the more carnivorous, the more smaller animals they eat, are they more toxic?
That's true, and we always thought that the carnivorous larger fish like tunas and sharks and barracudas have more mercury in them and more other toxic metals and more PCBs. So we do avoid those more. But that led to the thinking that sardines and minnows were better sources of omega-3 because they're small. But the problem with that is when you eat the small fish, you're eating the digestive tract with the fish. And the digestive tract is full of microplastic particles. And microplastic particles have endocrine disruptors, can increase risk of certain cancers like breast cancer and thyroid as well. So if you're going to eat, it's better for a mid-range fish, a mid-sized fish, not the big giant,
right.
But not the tiny fish we eat the whole digestive tract.
We're gonna have to take a station break. I'm sorry. This is Mission Evolution. www.missionevolution.org. Can food cure what ails you? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with the author of Eat for Life, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Dr. Fuhrman, we talked about healing with foods, but if you're correcting, I view illness as imbalance somewhere, right? If you're correcting a particular illness, are there particular prescription foods that you use?
I would say so. I mean, that's, my most prescriptive food is eating raw green cruciferous vegetables and sprouts. Those are most prescriptive foods. And people can grow sprouts in their own home and put it on their broccoli sprouts and alfalfa sprouts and mung bean sprouts and arugula sprouts and radish sprouts. You can grow it in a glass container, put the sprouts in, change the water once or twice a day, and then grow it. So I give people, one of my mantras is to say this: make the salad the main dish at one meal, because raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with the reduction of cancers of all types. And you mix in the salad, you're mixing lettuce, which green lettuce is a superfood. It has the richest source of sulfoquinidose to support the growth of healthy bacteria in the gut, as well as its all calcium is bioavailable because there's no oxalic acid in lettuce. So we have the lettuce mixed with the cruciferous green, like arugula or baby bok choy or kale or something, or cabbage. So we have those two mixed. And then the third most important ingredient is onion or scallion raw. Because when you chew the cruciferous vegetable and you chew the scallion or onion in your mouth, the enzymes create these anti-cancer compounds in the mouth in proportional to how well you chew. The nutrient that's shown to have the most powerful effects on cancer and longevity in green vegetables are called ITCs, which stands for isothiocyanates. And they're not in the vegetable until you chew it. So you break open the broccoli, you chew the kale, you chew the arugula. The ITCs are formed in the mouth from the chemical reaction that's occurring in your mouth as you crush the cell wall and liberate the myrosinase enzyme. The myrosinase enzyme catalyzes the reaction, and the ITCs are formed in the mouth. The same thing people know when they cut an onion. When they cut an onion, your eyes get tear from sulfenic acid, forming these anti-cancer sulfur-based compounds. So the anti-cancer compounds are formed when they're cut or when they're chewed. If you had cooked it first, you would deactivate the compounds. If you had cooked it and then chewed it, you deactivate the enzyme. If you overcook the broccoli or the kale and then you chew it, you're going to deactivate the compound. So chewing it raw gives you the most benefits. That's why urinary and blood isothiocyanates, ITCs, show the best correlation with low rates of cancer compared to cruciferous vegetables in the diet. You get more, when you measure urinary ITCs, then you're measuring, did the person eat the cruciferous vegetables raw, and did they chew it really well enough to increase the levels of ITCs in the body to the level high enough to get the maximum anti-cancer effects. The person just like swallowing their salad with no attention to chewing it well, or eating the broccoli or cabbage overly cooked, is not going to have the same ITC level as the person who's eating them raw or conservatively cooked and chewing them real well. So yes, prescriptive are the salad that we're then putting a nut-based dressing on, because the nuts and seeds giving the fat and the sterols to absorb the anti-cancer phytochemicals 40 times as much compared to having the salad without a fatty dressing on it. So it's like a prescriptive salad. And then, are you having a tablespoon of ground flax seeds or chia seeds every day for your source of these anti-cancer lignans that control estrogen and progesterone and your production of steroids, in other words, and hormones? So yes, we prescriptive say that, are you using a tablespoon of ground flax seeds and ground chia seeds, or a teaspoon at least in your diet? Actually, here's a study that showed, it was so fascinating. They took women with breast cancer and they followed it for 10 years. And they found that women who had 1/3 of a milligram of lignin in their diet, their risk of death over the 10-year period with the lignin compared to not with it was 71% less risk of death from 1/3 of a milligram of lignin. Now guess how many lignins are in a teaspoon of ground flax seeds?
Quite a few, it sounds like.
7 milligrams. 7. The women who had reduced the risk of death only had 1/3 of 1 milligram average. We're talking about 7 milligrams in a teaspoon. So we're saying that you'd be crazy not to eat a teaspoon of flax seeds in your salad and your soup and your morning breakfast cereal. It's just so incredibly protective. See, the diet I recommend, the nutritarian diet, is extremely it's precision nutrition that's prescriptive with a salad every day. Are you eating some berries or cherries every day? Right? Are you eating? Are you eating some beans every day? At least a half a cup of beans a day. Are you eating at least 1.5 ounces of nuts and seeds a day? Are you eating some scrub? Are you eating some cooked mushrooms every day? Are you eating some onion or scallion every day? So these prescriptive elements in the diet are more important whether you had a little bit of animal product or not. That wouldn't be as important as whether you had the full gamut of these powerful anti-cancer foods, right?
So, there's this real popular thing going on right now. It's called green shakes. So they take all this wonderful raw greens, but then you're not chewing them. So you're losing a lot of the benefits. Is that accurate?
No, because when you chew it, if you put the raw greens in the shake, the blender blades are going to break open the cell wall, and the chemical reaction forming the ITCs and the sulfur compounds from the onion could take place in the blender instead of your mouth.
Okay, so that they aren't going to be defunct, huh?
Correct. If you cooked it too much and then you blended it, you blow it. It's overcooking it. So when we make our soups, for example, we'll take our kale or our collards and we'll blend it in the blender raw with just a little soup liquid in there until we get a creamy green puree to get the ITCs in there. And then we'll pour it into the soup to cook, because the heat of the soup won't destroy the ITCs. But if I heated it up and then I blended it, they wouldn't have formed. Or if I heated it up and then chewed it, I would have deactivated the enzymes. So as long as you blend it before you heat it, you keep the enzymes, the anti-cancer compounds intact.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about food addictions, because I'm sure a lot of our audience listening to, they're going, bah, okay, because it's not the normal diet that we've all grown used to that's killing all of us. So is there such a thing as food addictions? And if so, what do you do about them?
You're absolutely 100% correct that people are addicted to the diet they're eating, and their brain gets neurologically wired to like those foods, and they don't want to give anything up. And a person listening to me speak to you today could say, oh, this sounds scientific and even interesting, but it's not for me. I could never change the way I eat anyway. I like the way I eat. I'd rather die younger and just enjoy my life, is what they're going to say to themselves. You know what I mean? Because that's the way the mind works. The addict comes up with rationalizations and excuses to continue self-destructive behaviors. And so the answer is, yes, we can design healthy food to taste great. The recipes, the garlic, all the flavorings we're using, to make delicious things taste delicious. Yes, but there's a period of adjustment where people have to learn to prefer healthy food by just eating it, even if they don't like it as much at the beginning, because it takes time. We're talking about months for a person's taste preferences to change. So it takes months to learn new recipes and to have and to retrain your taste buds, but also the brain's desire to overeat. We want people to eat what they feel like eating. We want them to instinctually feel comfortable with eating the right amount of food. But when they become an addict, they're craving excess amount of food and excess hyperpalatable and excess stimulation, extra sugar and extra salt and extra, they're just craving all these things that they feel empty. Like they could have lunch with me and have a big salad, a bowl of vegetable bean soup, and a mango for dessert. And I'll feel, wow, I just had a great lunch. And they'll be saying, I want to go eat. I can eat something like a piece of pizza now. I'm starving.
Yeah. So where's the main course?
Where am I going to eat? The brain didn't get anything. The brain didn't get enough stimulation. That's why the people come to our retreat. They stay here for a month or two, and then they realize over time they become satisfied and they like eating. But at the beginning, they're not satisfied with eating healthily. It takes time to beat an addiction. Any kind of addiction takes time to get over it.
So that was going to be my next question is when you're trying to get over a real serious addiction, usually the best is to get away from your old environment and go on a retreat or go into a detox center or whatever to get that started so that you aren't fighting this, the brain telling you, no, it's okay. We need to eat this because it tastes good or whatever the brain does.
Right.
So what do you suggest or what do you offer for people that really want to get out of that junk food addiction and eat more healthy and live longer, but they're just caught in the loop? What do you have to offer them?
I know. Well, I do have a retreat here in San Diego where people come and stay here for a month or 2 or 3. So we do have that. But I know most people can't afford that. They can't take the time out to their life. So we do have courses and motivational series of teaching modules on the website. And we have coaches that can work with them. And we have discussions and forums. People discuss with each other. And they can ask me questions through the web and get my feedback. So we try to connect with people, get them so they can connect with each other, to talk to and get more important motivation and information in their own homes. So they can clean their house out, throw away the junk. Join us for our 3-day detox where we're going to just eat healthy for 3 weeks and see if we can get you jump started onto a healthy lifestyle. So yeah, we're doing that, and we try to do our best. It doesn't work in every case, and for people that need our help and more intensive, they can come out and stay here too.
I'm so glad you're offering that because, I think food addiction is probably a larger problem than alcohol at this point.
It is. It's just so many people getting more cancer rates, more cancer in young people, and more, we're seeing that food is driving an explosion of disease, of tragedies, human tragedies.
Yeah, I know that I personally have experienced, and I've never been much of a junk food person, but I personally experienced when I really pay attention to my diet, surprising things happen. I mean, funny little symptoms that I had will disappear and the energy level goes up. And what I thought was normal aging is not normal. So what do you see as the people can look forward to if they do clean up their diet and go with the recommended vegan plus the supplementation?
It's amazing that so many people who've done this have reported that their brain fog lifted, and they not only have more energy, but they're able to think more clearly and more creatively. So the interesting thing is that people age and they don't realize as they're aging their body and getting overweight and eating unhealthy, it's aging the brain, and they're losing their memory, creativity, and passion for living. So what I see come back is the excitement and passion for life, their enjoyment of life, and they'll be able to have creative goodwill for other people, and their connectedness and social aspects of enjoying their life more. So as you would think, people would say, oh, I'm just going to eat recreationally and I'd rather just don't care what happens to me down the road. We're seeing the opposite occurs. People get much more enjoyment and pleasure out of their life when they take better care of their health.
So is the brain fog from brain inflammation from the toxins?
Yes, that's correct.
Ugh, man, you're killing yourself, right?
Yeah, and taking drugs too, and legally prescribed medication,
Mhm.
it affects brain function negatively.
Yeah. Well, it's almost time for us to call it good. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, Dr. Furman, what's your mission?
My mission has always been, because you can see I'm so passionate, excited about this, is so everybody in the United States knows that they don't have to be sick, they don't have to have a heart attack, and don't have to have a stroke, and don't have to get cancer. They can do what they want, but they should at least know that there's a way they can get their health back if they want to, and they want them to know the power of nutritional excellence.
Well, that's a beautiful mission and so very much needed right now. I just don't think we have, with all the pollution present and chemicals and this and that, we have less leeway to to indulge in less than healthy eating, I would expect.
I agree.
Mhm. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Dr. Furman, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Our guest this hour has been Dr. Joel Furman. Dr. Furman is an internationally recognized expert on nutrition and natural healing and the author of Eat for Life. If you'd like to find out more about Dr. Furman and all the considerable things he has to offer, visit his website, drfurman.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here on the X Zone TV channel, XZTVCA, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.